The coffee shop smelled of burnt espresso and disappointment. Alexander Hartwell watched through the window as his maid Natalie Brooks, the woman who cleaned his penthouse every morning, sat at a corner table with a crumpled flyer. Blind date special. $5. Her hands, the same ones that scrubbed his floors, now folded a cloth napkin with the precision of someone trained in fine dining. When the date arrived, his first words cut sharp. $5? You're cheap even by your standards. Natalie's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. Alexander saw something flicker in her eyes, not shame, but the cold calculation of someone who'd learned to swallow insults like medicine. He stood up. He didn't know why. But as he crossed that café, something in her posture, the way she held her spine too straight, her chin too high for a woman supposedly broken by circumstance, made him realize his maid wasn't who she claimed to be, and the truth hiding behind her silence would cost him everything he thought he knew about power, privilege, and the price of looking away. Alexander Hartwell had not planned to be in this neighborhood on Thursday afternoon. His driver had taken a detour to avoid construction, and the black sedan idled at a red light near modest storefronts. Alexander normally never noticed. Coffee shops with handwritten menus, laundromats with flickering signs, bodegas selling lottery tickets. This was not his Manhattan of glass towers and private clubs. This was the other city, the one that cleaned his penthouse and disappeared when the work was done. He was scrolling through quarterly reports when movement caught his eye through a cafe window across the street. Natalie Brooks sat at a corner table, wearing a burgundy dress instead of her usual work clothes, holding a paper flyer that read, "Blind date special, $5. Alexander told his driver to pull over. He could not explain why. Perhaps it was curiosity about the woman who moved through his home like a ghost. Perhaps it was the smile on Natalie's face, simultaneously hopeful and resigned. Perhaps it was simply that Alexander Hartwell, who had built his fortune by noticing patterns others missed, had just realized his maid was a pattern he had never bothered to examine. He stepped out of the car and walked into a coffee shop across the street, positioning himself where he could watch without being seen. He ordered an espresso he did not want and sat down to observe. Natalie checked her phone repeatedly, adjusted the flyer with precise movements, looked toward the door with boardroom wariness. A man walked in, mid-30s, dressed in a cheap suit trying too hard, hair gelled into submission. He scanned the cafe, spotted the flyer, approached with swagger. Alexander watched the man sit without asking permission, say something that made Natalie's smile die. The man laughed loud enough to be overheard. His voice carried clearly, $5? You're cheap even by your standards. Natalie's jaw clenched, but her eyes went cold, not hurt but calculating. Alexander stood before he consciously decided to move. He crossed the street, pushed through the door. The bell chimed. Natalie looked up, shock flashing before smoothing to neutrality. The man did not notice, absorbed in his phone. Alexander walked directly to their table. "I think you should leave. Now." The man looked up, saw Alexander's suit, the Patek Philippe, the unmistakable authority. His swagger evaporated. "Who the hell are you?" Alexander smiled without warmth. "Someone who does not appreciate hearing women insulted in public. You have 10 seconds before I make a phone call to your employer." The man's face went pale. He stood, muttered something crude, and left. Alexander sat down in the vacated chair, moving slower, more respectfully. Natalie stared at him. "That was not necessary, Mr. Hartwell. I have handled worse." Alexander believed her. "I am sure you have, but you should not have to." Natalie's eyes searched for the angle. "Why are you here?" Alexander had acted on instinct, rare for him. "I was passing by. I could not just sit there." Natalie's laugh was bitter. You have been sitting there for 6 months, every morning reading your paper while I clean around you like I am invisible. Why see me now?" The words hit hard because they were true. "You are right. I do not see you. I should. I am sorry." Natalie studied him, then picked up her worn purse and stood. "Thank you for the rescue, but I do not need saving. I need basic human decency without it being heroic." She turned to leave. Alexander touched her arm gently. "Wait, please. Have coffee with me. Real coffee. I would like to understand why my maid needs $5 dates when I pay agency wages that should be sufficient." The air went still. Natalie's face hardened. "You want me to explain my finances like I am some charity case? This is my private life. You do not get to buy access just because you pay my employer." She walked to the door, paused, turned back. Alexander saw pain in her eyes, deep and old. "Do you know what the worst part of being invisible is? It is not that people do not see you. It is that when they finally look, they cannot imagine you are anything more than what they decided you are. You see a maid on a cheap date and think you know my story. You do not know anything." She left, and Alexander sat with the crumpled flyer, realizing his maid had just read him more accurately than any business rival. That night in his penthouse, Alexander could not stop thinking about Natalie Brooks. In 6 months, he knew almost nothing. She arrived at 7, left at 3, cleaned thoroughly, was polite to his 8-year-old son Liam. She had never called in sick, never complained. She was the perfect employee because she was perfectly invisible. Alexander opened his laptop and pulled up the agency file. Standard background check, clean record, 3 references, Queen's address, no social media, no red flags. It was almost too clean, suggesting someone who had scrubbed their digital footprint. Someone starting over from zero. Morning came too early. Alexander was awake when he heard his front door open at 7 exactly. Natalie's keys, provided by the agency. He had never questioned giving a stranger access to his home. Now it seemed like profound faith taken for granted. He stayed in his study, listening to familiar sounds. When Alexander finally walked to the kitchen, everything felt different. Natalie was wiping counters, her back to him. He noticed things he had missed. The way she held her shoulders, almost military. The way she angled her body to keep the room in view. The way her hands moved with precision, suggesting they had done very different work. "Good morning, Miss Brooks," Alexander said, using her last name for the first time. Natalie turned, face neutral. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell. Your coffee is ready. Black, no sugar." She gestured to the cup already poured, proof she had heard him coming. Alexander picked up the coffee, but did not drink. "About yesterday." Natalie cut him off smoothly. "No need to discuss it, sir. It has no bearing on our professional relationship. It was a perfect deflection." Alexander crossed the line she had drawn. "I disagree. I have employed you 6 months and realized yesterday I know nothing about you. That is my failure." Natalie's hands stilled. "With respect, you are not supposed to know about me. I am hired to clean, not be your friend. Professional distance benefits us both." Alexander should have listened. Instead, he said, "You have skills that exceed your position. The way you folded that napkin, the way you speak, educated and precise. The way you organize my study, alphabetizing books by author, then chronologically. That is not standard protocol. That is someone who worked in libraries, archives, or corporate research." The silence was complete. Natalie turned slowly, calculation in her eyes. She was deciding how much to reveal. "I had a different life before this. It ended badly. I needed work without references from my previous career. Your questions make me reconsider whether this arrangement serves my needs." It was a warning. "Back off, or I walk." Alexander should have backed off. But he had not built a fortune by avoiding puzzles. I am not trying to make you uncomfortable. I'm trying to understand. Yesterday, I saw something in your eyes when that man insulted you. Not hurt, something colder. You have been underestimated before, repeatedly. And you have learned to let them underestimate you because it is safer than proving them wrong. Natalie's breath caught, barely noticeable. He had hit something true. You do not know me, Mr. Hartwell, and you do not want to, because if you knew, you would have to decide what to do with that knowledge. It is easier to keep me in the box, labeled Maid. She picked up her supplies and walked toward the bathroom, dismissing him. Alexander let her go. But standing alone, he made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find out who Natalie Brooks really was. Something in her eyes, that cold, calculating fury, reminded him of himself. He pulled out his phone and texted Kyle Morrison, his head of security, a former FBI agent, "Need deeper dive on employee Natalie Brooks. Something does not add up." "Find out what?" Kyle's response came instantly. "On it." "How deep?" Alexander typed back, "Everything," but quietly. He sent it, immediately felt dirty for doing so. This was violation of privacy, abuse of power. But Alexander silenced the guilt. The rest of the morning passed in uncomfortable silence. At noon, Natalie knocked on his study door. "I am leaving early today. Personal appointment. I will make up hours tomorrow." She had never left early. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Natalie's smile was fake. "Everything is fine, sir. See you Monday." She was gone, leaving Alexander with the feeling he had driven away, the one person honest enough to tell him he did not know anything. That evening, Alexander attended his sister's dinner party in Tribeca. Senator Morrison was there, along with Manhattan elite. He played his role perfectly. During dessert, his phone buzzed. "Kyle, preliminary findings. You need to see this in person. Tomorrow morning, your office. This is bigger than employee vetting." Saturday morning came with grey light. Alexander arrived at his office. Kyle was waiting, a thin folder on the desk. When Kyle looked troubled, it meant something genuinely troubling had been uncovered. "Talk to me," Alexander said, opening the folder. What he saw made him stop breathing. A news article from 3 years ago. Vertex Dynamics acquired in controversial deal, former director blamed for failed product launch. There was a photograph, a corporate headshot of a woman in blazer, hair straightened, makeup professional. The caption, "Natalie Simone Brooks, former director of innovation at Vertex Dynamics, declined to comment on allegations of mismanagement." It was Natalie. Same eyes, same structure. But everything else was different. Kyle spoke quietly. "Natalie Simone Brooks, age 34, Howard University, Wharton MBA. Started at Vertex Dynamics out of grad school, climbed to Director of Innovation in 7 years. One of few black women in senior leadership in tech. 3 years ago, Vertex was acquired by TechCore Industries. The acquisition went sideways. Product launch failed, cost overruns, lawsuits. Someone needed blame. Natalie Brooks was that someone. Alexander flipped through documents. Legal filings, news articles, internal memo leaked to press detailing mismanagement by Director Brooks. He saw the pattern immediately. Classic corporate scapegoating. Find someone expendable, load them with blame. Natalie, as a black woman in white male industry, had been the perfect sacrifice. "How bad?" Alexander asked. Kyle pulled out more documents. "Ugly." She tried to fight it, hired lawyers, filed wrongful termination suits. TechCore countersued for defamation. Legal battle dragged 18 months, ate her savings, destroyed her reputation. No one would hire her, not because they believed allegations, but because she became toxic. A woman who sued was a woman no employer wanted. He slid another article across. The headline made Alexander's stomach turn. Former tech executive's father dies during legal battle, family faces medical debt. Alexander read slowly. Raymond Brooks, age 62, died of complications from late-stage cancer. The family struggled to afford treatment. Natalie had been forced to drop her lawsuit to focus on her father's care. There was a quote from Natalie at her father's memorial. "My father taught me to stand straight and tell the truth, even when the world wants you bent and silent. I will not dishonor his memory." There was a photograph, hair natural, face exhausted, eyes hollowed by grief. After her father died, she disappeared, Kyle continued. No social media, no public records beyond utilities. Worked low-wage jobs, eventually domestic work through agencies, rebuilding under the radar. He closed the folder. The question is, did she know who you were when she took this job? Alexander looked up sharply. What do you mean? Kyle's expression was neutral. TechCore Industries, the company that acquired Vertex. Guess who was one of their major investors? He slid one more document across. Investment portfolio from Hartwell Ventures. There, buried in dozens of holdings, was TechCore Industries. Alexander had invested $20 million in the acquisition fund. Made a tidy profit when TechCore went public, never bothered to learn how that profit was generated. His money had helped fund the acquisition that destroyed Natalie's life. The room felt airless. Alexander's hands began to tremble. I did not know. Kyle nodded. I believe you. Question is, does she? If Natalie figured out you were connected to TechCore, if she took this job, knowing your money was part of what destroyed her, we need to consider what her endgame is. Alexander stood and walked to the window, rain streaking the glass. She deserves to know that I know, Alexander said finally. And she deserves an explanation, or an apology. Kyle's voice was careful. Boss, you do not owe her anything legally. Your investment was legitimate. You were 10 steps removed from people who destroyed her life. Getting involved now is a choice, not obligation. Alexander turned. No. She cleans my house. She is kind to my son. She showed up every day for 6 months, even knowing my money helped fund the machine that destroyed her. If that is not obligation, I do not know what is. He grabbed his coat. Kyle called after him. What are you going to do? Alexander did not have a good answer. I am going to talk to her. Tell her I know. Let her decide what happens next. Alexander arrived at Natalie's Queen's apartment just after noon. The building was old but maintained, a 5-story walk-up. He climbed to 3C, knocked, movement inside, long pause. Then Natalie's voice through the door. Who is it? Alexander took a breath. It is Alexander Hartwell. I need to talk to you. Please. Another pause. The lock clicked. The door opened 6 inches, held by chain. Natalie's face appeared. She had been crying, red eyes, puffy face. She wore sweatpants and Howard University t-shirt. How did you get my address? Her voice was flat. The agency file. I know I should not be here, but I found out something today. I need you to know that I know. Natalie studied him through the gap, then laughed, bitter and humorless. You investigated me? Of course. Because that is what people with power do when they encounter something they do not understand. That is not why. Alexander started. Natalie cut him off. Is it not? You could not stand not knowing. So you sent your security team to excavate my life, turn my trauma into a folder you could review over coffee. She was right. Alexander had convinced himself he was doing it for good reasons, but really, he did it because he was used to having all information, all control. "You are right," Alexander said, abandoning justification. "I had no right. I violated your privacy because I was curious and because I could." He pulled the folder from his coat and held it up. "This is everything my investigator found. I am giving it to you. Read it, burn it, whatever you want. It is your story, not mine." He slid it through the gap. Natalie took it with shaking hands, opened it, flipped through pages. Her face went very still. "You know about Vertex." "Not a question. I know about Vertex, TechCore, the scapegoating, the lawsuit, your father." Alexander paused, forced himself to say the rest. "And I know Hartwell Ventures invested in the TechCore acquisition fund. My money was part of what made that deal possible. I did not know about you specifically. I had dozens of investments. But that is not an excuse. My capital helped fund people who destroyed your life. I am sorry." Natalie stood frozen, folder hanging from her hands. Then, slowly, she closed the door. Alexander heard the chain slide off. The door opened fully. Natalie stood there in her small apartment, surrounded by modest furniture. "You did not know," she said finally. "I figured that out quickly after starting work for you. You are not the hands-on type. You invest, trust, move on. That is how people like you operate. You do not see casualties because you are always 10,000 feet up." Her voice was not angry, just tired, exhaustion of someone carrying weight that never got lighter. "When did you figure out the connection?" Alexander asked. Natalie gestured him inside. The apartment was small, but organized. "About 2 months in. I overheard you on a call with portfolio managers. You mentioned TechCore's IPO, how well it performed, how your investment tripled, and I knew. I looked it up, confirmed it, then had to decide whether to quit or stay." "Why did you stay?" Natalie sat on her small couch, looking much older than 34. "Because I needed the job. Because I could not afford to be righteously angry when I had rent and medical bills from my father's final months still drowning me. Because you are just another rich man who profited from a system that chews up people like me. Getting angry at you would be like getting angry at the ocean for being wet." The resignation was worse than anger. Alexander sat across from her, unable to stand. "I cannot undo what happened. But I can do something now." Natalie held up a hand. "Do not. Please do not offer me money or a job or some redemption arc where you get to be the white savior fixing the broken black woman. I do not need saving. I just need people to stop destroying me and then acting surprised I am damaged." They sat in silence, rain against windows, distant traffic. Alexander felt the weight of his privilege not as abstract concept, but concrete reality. He had made one investment decision, probably did not even review details. And that casual participation contributed to dismantling a woman's life, her father's death, her exile from the career she worked so hard to build. "I have a son," Alexander said finally. "Liam. 8 years old. After my wife died 4 years ago, I had to learn single parenting. One of the hardest things was realizing how much I missed when I was too busy building my company. School plays, conferences, bedtime stories. I thought providing financially was enough. It was not. Liam needed me to actually see him, know him, be present. I failed at that for years without realizing." He looked at Natalie. "You told me I do not see you. You are right. But I am trying to learn, not because it makes me noble, because it makes me less of a failure as a human being." Natalie's expression softened. "Liam talks about you sometimes. He says you are teaching him chess. He seems proud of that." Alexander smiled despite himself. "He is terrible at chess, but he tries so hard." Natalie laughed. Real this time. My determination got me here, scrubbing your floors. But it also means I get up every morning and decide to keep going. That is the part my father gave me, the only inheritance I have left. Alexander felt something crack open in his chest. Teach me about the world I have been too comfortable to see. Not as my employee. Just help me understand what I have been missing. Natalie looked at him for a long moment. Why would I do that? What is in it for me? Alexander thought honestly. Nothing material, but maybe it would feel good to have someone actually listen. Someone with resources who could do something useful with the education. Natalie walked to her window, looking out at rain-soaked streets. I will think about it, but first, you need to leave. I need time to process that my employer just showed up with a folder full of my trauma and an apology that cannot fix anything. It was dismissal, but gentle. Alexander stood, moved to the door, paused. For what it is worth, you were the best director of innovation Vertex ever had. I read the articles. Before the scapegoating, you were launching revolutionary products. The industry lost something valuable when they drove you out. Natalie did not turn. But he saw her shoulders tighten, saw her hand wipe at her face. Thank you. That is the first time in 3 years anyone has said that to me. Monday morning, Natalie arrived at 7 exactly. Alexander was waiting with 2 cups of coffee, both prepared how she liked hers, cream and 1 sugar. She stopped, surprised. Good morning, Miss Brooks. I made coffee. I thought we could talk before you start work, if you are willing. Natalie hesitated, then took the offered cup. She sipped, small smile crossing her face. You actually remembered. I am trying to pay attention. I will probably be bad at it, but I am trying. They sat at the kitchen island. I have been thinking about what you said. Natalie began. About wanting to understand. I have decided I am willing to help you, but on my terms. Name them, Alexander said immediately. First, you pay me my regular wage for this. I am not doing free emotional labor. Second, we do this during work hours, not my personal time. Third, if this becomes exploitative or performative, I walk. Agreed? Alexander nodded. Agreed. And I want to add a term. I want you to tell me honestly, if you figured out the TechCore connection before taking this job, I need to know if you came here with a plan. It was a risk. But uncomfortable truth was better than comfortable lies. Natalie looked him in the eye. Yes, I figured it out during the interview process. Agency mentioned prominent tech investor. I did research, found your TechCore investment, and took the job anyway. Alexander's heart sank. Why? Natalie's smile was sad. Because I wanted to see the face of the man whose money helped destroy my life. I wanted to see if you were a monster, or just another oblivious rich person who never thinks about where his returns come from. And I found you are the latter, which is somehow worse. Because at least monsters know they are monsters. You just did not care enough to know. It stung because it was true. And now? Now that I know, now that I care, is that enough? Natalie picked up her coffee. I do not know yet, but I am willing to find out. That is all I can offer right now. It was more than Alexander deserved. The days that followed fell into new pattern. Coffee and conversation for 30 minutes, Alexander asking questions, Natalie answering when she felt like it. He learned she played violin as child, but sold it to pay legal fees. That she spoke 3 languages, skills she learned to make herself valuable in tech. That she missed teaching, which she did as adjunct professor. He learned her father was a postal worker who saved every penny for Howard. That her mother died when Natalie was 12, and her father raised her alone, working double shifts for music lessons and summer programs. That Raymond Brooks never missed a single school event. That when Natalie was offered Vertex, her father cried because his daughter was going to change the world. When the world rejected her instead, when industry called her incompetent, her father still believed. Right up until cancer took him. Alexander learned these things in fragments. With each revelation, weight of his complicity grew heavier. He could not undo the past, could not bring back her father or career or 3 years lost, but he could do something now. The answer came unexpectedly 3 weeks after Alexander showed up at Natalie's apartment. Liam was homesick with mild fever. Natalie stayed late to help, making soup, sitting with Liam. When Alexander finished a call and walked into Liam's room, he found them building elaborate Lego spaceship. Liam explaining ion propulsion, Natalie asking technical questions that made him light up. "Miss Natalie knows about real spaceships," Liam announced. "She told me about orbital mechanics." Alexander looked at Natalie, who shrugged. "I worked on satellite project at Vertex. Before," the word hung, "before betrayal, before exile." Liam, oblivious, grabbed Natalie's hand. "Dad, can Miss Natalie teach me more science? She is better at explaining than my teacher." Alexander saw longing mixed with pain flicker across Natalie's face. This was what she lost, not just job or salary, but chance to mentor, teach, pass on knowledge. "Would you want to?" Alexander asked carefully. "I could pay you separately for tutoring, not as employer, but as parent hiring expert." Natalie looked at Liam, gazing up with uncomplicated trust, then at Alexander. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. Same rules, fair wages, clear boundaries." That evening, after Liam slept and Natalie packed to leave, Alexander stopped her at the door. "Thank you, not just for staying late, but for being patient with him. With both of us." Natalie adjusted her worn bag strap. "Liam is a good kid. He reminds me why I wanted to work in tech. Not for money or status, but because I wanted to build things that would make the world better for kids like him." She paused. "Your wife?" Liam mentioned she died. "I am sorry." "That must be hard." Alexander nodded. "Car accident, 4 years ago, drunk driver, instant." The hardest part was explaining to Liam that his mother was not coming home, that later and tomorrow were all lies now, that absence was permanent. Natalie's expression softened. "My father's death was slow. Cancer, diagnosed too late. I had months to prepare. Did not make it easier. I think grief is grief, however it comes." She met his eyes. "But you are doing okay with Liam. He talks about you like you are his hero, the chess lessons, the stories. You are showing up. That matters more than you know." It was the kindest thing Natalie had said, and Alexander felt unexpected tightness in his throat. "I am trying to be the parent he deserves. None of us always succeed," Natalie said. "But you are trying. That is more than a lot of people do." She left, and Alexander stood in his penthouse, feeling the crushing loneliness of success. The following week brought unexpected crisis. Alexander hosted a dinner party, obligatory social event to maintain relationships and close deals. 20 people, expensive catering, wine costing more per bottle than Natalie made in a week. Natalie was not scheduled but agreed to help coordinate as event manager for proper wages plus bonus. Evening started well. Guests arrived, drinks poured, conversations about trends. Natalie moved through crowd with professional efficiency. Alexander watched his guests dismiss her, interrupt mid-sentence to bark orders like she was furniture. Then Chad Harrison arrived, tech CEO whose company Alexander had invested in. Harrison was brash, overconfident, with casual cruelty he mistook for honesty. He brought his young girlfriend, held court about his latest acquisition. Natalie walked past with champagne tray when Harrison grabbed glass without looking. The abrupt movement made Natalie stumble, few drops splashing onto his expensive shoes. Harrison looked down, then up, with exaggerated outrage. Jesus Christ! Are you serious? These are Gucci. Do you know what these cost? His voice was loud enough that conversation stopped. Natalie set down the tray, reached for napkin. I apologize, sir. Let me clean that. Her voice was perfectly controlled, perfectly professional, voice of someone who learned to stay calm when berated. Harrison jerked his foot away. Do not touch them. You have done enough damage. What kind of operation are you running? Hartwell. Cannot even hire competent staff. Alexander felt something snap inside. He crossed the room in 4 strides and positioned himself between Harrison and Natalie. The kind of operation where I do not tolerate guests disrespecting my staff, Alexander said, voice quiet but with edge that made people wince. Particularly when the incident was caused by you grabbing glass without looking. Harrison's face flushed. Are you seriously taking her side over $1,000 shoes? It is just the help, man. Relax. The phrase, just the help, hung like grenade. Alexander felt every muscle go rigid. Behind him, Natalie went very still. Her name is Natalie Brooks, Alexander said, each word precise and cold. She has degree from Howard and MBA from Wharton. She was Director of Innovation at Vertex Dynamics before your industry blacklisted her for refusing to be scapegoat. He paused, making sure everyone listened. She speaks 3 languages, designed satellite systems, and has forgotten more about technology than you have ever learned. And you are just a guest who is no longer welcome in my home. Get out! Harrison's face went pale. You cannot be serious. Over some maid? I am extremely serious. You have 60 seconds before I have security, escort you out, and send memo to every investor in your company explaining why I am divesting. Your choice. Harrison looked around for support, found only uncomfortable silence. Finally, he grabbed his coat and left, muttering about woke bullshit. The door slammed. Room remained silent. Alexander turned to face remaining guests. Let me be extremely clear. This is not performative. This is not virtue signaling. This is me establishing I will not tolerate casual dehumanization of service workers in my home or business. If that makes you uncomfortable, if you think Chad was treated unfairly, I invite you to leave as well. No hard feelings. But I am done pretending I do not see how people with power treat people without it. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one left. Slowly, conversation resumed, quieter, more thoughtful. For rest of evening, Alexander noticed guests treated Natalie with noticeably more respect, saying please and thank you, making eye contact, treating her like human being. After last guest left, after staff departed, Alexander found Natalie in kitchen, standing at window, looking out at nighttime city. He approached slowly. I am sorry that happened, and I am sorry you had to hear what I said about Vertex, about your credentials. I should have asked before making your history public. Natalie did not turn. You should not have had to defend me. I can fight my own battles. I know you can. But you should not have to, not alone, not every time. Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, no one has ever done that for me. Not at Vertex, when CEO threw me under bus. Not during lawsuit, when my lawyers advised me to settle because fighting would destroy me. Not in 3 years since, when I have been called just the help or worse and had to smile because I needed job. No one has ever stood up and said, this is wrong, and I will not allow it, until tonight. Her voice cracked. So, thank you. Even if you should not have had to, even if I should be strong enough to not need defending. Thank you for seeing I am human." Alexander moved to stand beside her at window, both reflected in glass against Manhattan at night. "You are the strongest person I have ever met. But strength should not mean having to endure endless degradation. That is not strength. That is just survival. And you deserve better than mere survival." Natalie finally turned, and in dim light, Alexander saw tears on her face. Not sobs, just quiet tears of someone who had been holding something heavy too long and had finally, briefly, been allowed to set it down. "I am so tired," she whispered. "So tired of being strong, of proving I am worth basic dignity, of fighting every day just to exist in spaces never designed for people like me." Without thinking, Alexander pulled her into hug. Natalie stiffened, then relaxed and leaned into it, crying in earnest now. 3 years of grief and rage, pouring out in shaking sobs, she tried to muffle against his shirt. Alexander just held her, not offering platitudes, just being present for another human being's pain. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her face, she looked embarrassed. "I am sorry. That was unprofessional." "No," Alexander said firmly. "That was human. Nothing unprofessional about having emotions after being disrespected in front of a room full of people." Natalie laughed, watery sound. "You just cost yourself an investor because of me. Harrison's company is worth millions. Your board will be furious." Alexander shrugged. "Let them be furious. Some things matter more than returns. I am 43, and I am just now figuring that out. Better late than never." He walked to cabinet and pulled out good scotch, the bottle he saved for major deals. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to Natalie. "To learning what actually matters," he said, raising his glass. Natalie looked at scotch, then at him, then smiled. Real, genuine smile that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "To learning what actually matters," she echoed. They drank together in Alexander's kitchen, while city sparkled below like field of earthbound stars. It was not a romantic moment, though later, looking back, Alexander would recognize it as a moment when something shifted between them, when they stopped being employer and employee and became simply 2 people trying to be better versions of themselves. Fallout came swiftly. By Monday, Alexander's inbox was full of messages from board members asking what happened. Harrison had spent weekend calling his network, spinning story about Alexander's erratic behavior and inappropriate relationship with household staff. Gossip spread through Manhattan elite circles. Kyle showed up with file of messages and tech blog posts. "You are trending on fintech Twitter. Half internet thinks you are hypocrite buying PR. Other half thinks you are genuinely changing. For what it is worth, I think you did right thing. But it will cost you." Alexander leaned back. "How much?" Kyle pulled out spreadsheet. 3 investors considering pulling out. 2 prospective clients cancelled meetings. Harrison threatening lawsuit for defamation and loss of business. Alexander reviewed numbers without emotion. Losses were significant, not enough to damage company seriously, but enough to sting. Let him sue. "We have 20 witnesses who saw him grab champagne without looking, 20 who heard him call my employee just the help. His case will not survive. As for investors who want out, let them. I am tired of doing business with people who think casual cruelty is acceptable as long as directed at service workers." Kyle nodded slowly. "This will change your reputation. You spent 20 years building image as hard-nosed investor. One dinner party does not erase that. People will be skeptical. Good, they should be. I am skeptical of my own motives half the time. But I am done optimizing every decision for maximum profit and minimum ethical complexity." He paused. "What does Natalie think? Has she been affected? Kyle's expression became neutral. 3 reporters approached her for comment. She declined. And several people in her former industry reached out. Word got around about her credentials, what happened at Vertex. There has been interest in reconnecting. Alexander felt something twist in his chest, hope mixed with emotion he did not want to examine. That is good. She deserves doors to reopen. Kyle studied Alexander's face. Are you prepared for what happens if those doors open? If she gets offered position that takes her away? It was question Alexander had been avoiding. In past weeks, Natalie had become fixture in his life, beyond employer-employee. She was teaching Liam, educating Alexander, making him laugh at dinner. I am prepared to be happy for her, Alexander said. Not exactly answer, but best he could offer. She deserves to rebuild her career. If my small role is that I paid her fairly and treated her with respect, that is enough. Kyle did not look convinced, but was professional enough not to push. All right. I will handle investor relations and let legal know about Harrison. Anything else? Alexander thought. Yes. Set up meeting with board. I want to announce new initiative focused on supporting professionals who have been blacklisted or scapegoated, scholarship funds, legal aid, career rehabilitation, the Brooks Initiative. And I want Natalie involved in designing it, if she is willing. She is expert on what is actually needed, not me. Kyle raised eyebrow. You are asking your maid to help design major charitable initiative? I am asking former Director of Innovation with first-hand experience of industry blacklisting to consult on program designed to help people in similar situations. And I am going to pay her consulting rates, not domestic worker rates, assuming she is interested. Kyle nodded. I will set it up. For what it is worth, I think you are doing right thing. It is messy and complicated and will cost you business. But it is right thing. That evening, Alexander arrived home to find Natalie and Liam building solar system model. Liam was hanging styrofoam balls from ceiling, explaining orbital mechanics with confidence. Alexander smiled, setting down briefcase. Natalie was on chair, helping Liam secure Jupiter. She looked over shoulder and smiled warmly. We might have gotten carried away. Your living room looks like planetarium exploded. It looks perfect, Alexander said honestly. He walked into kitchen, started preparing pasta. Natalie joined him after getting Liam settled with documentary. Liam has been asking about his mother, Natalie said quietly. He wanted to know if I thought she could see him from heaven. I told him I did not know about heaven, but people who love us stay with us in lessons they teach and memories they leave behind. I hope that was okay. Alexander felt throat tighten. That was perfect. Thank you. They worked side by side. Finally, Alexander said, I heard people from your old industry reached out. That is good news. Natalie nodded slowly. A few. There is startup founder looking for CTO. I am meeting him next week, just to talk. Alexander kept voice neutral. You should pursue it. You deserve to get back to work you are trained for. Natalie looked troubled. 3 months ago, I would have done anything for this. But now I am not sure I want to go back to that world. The corporate ladder, constant proving myself, I am tired of fighting. She gestured at notes on counter. The tech industry exhausts me. It was first time she had used his first name. The intimacy made Alexander's heart skip. You do not have to fight anymore. You could do something different, Natalie asked. Like what? Alexander turned off stove and faced her. You are qualified to do whatever you want. You are brilliant, strategic, creative, resilient. You could consult, teach, start your own company. He hesitated. Or work with me, not as staff, as real partner. I want to start initiative to help people who have been blacklisted or scapegoated. The Brooks Initiative. And I want you to design it, Run it, make it useful instead of performative. Natalie stared. You want to name program after me? After problem you represent. Talented people destroyed by systems prioritizing profit over justice. You are expert on what is needed. I am just guy with resources finally paying attention. Alexander met her eyes. This would be paid position, senior director level, competitive salary, real authority. You would report to me with full discretion. I am offering you job, Natalie. Real job, using your skills for something that matters. Natalie was quiet, cycling through shock, suspicion, hope, fear. Finally, why are you doing this? Really? Alexander thought carefully. Because I have spent last month watching you navigate world I never bothered to see. I have all this money and influence. What is point if I am not fixing systems that broke you, that break thousands of talented people? He moved closer. I cannot fix what happened, cannot bring back your father or those 3 years, but I can do something now. And I do not want to do it without you, because program designed by rich people who never experienced injustice will be useless. I need your expertise, your perspective, your anger. I am not offering charity. I am offering job that would make this initiative worth doing. Natalie's eyes shimmered. You are serious. Actually serious. Completely. Take time to think. Talk to startup CTO. Explore options. But this offer stands. No strings. No expectations. Alexander stepped back. And whatever you decide, you have already changed something important. You changed me. Made me see things I was ignoring. That matters, regardless of what happens next. Natalie wiped at her eyes, laughing. You are making it hard to maintain professional distance. Good, Alexander said. Professional distance was problem all along. They stood in kitchen with something unnamed hanging between them. Natalie broke silence. I need to think about it. Initiative sounds amazing, but I need to figure out if I am ready to trust you. Fair, Alexander said. Take whatever time you need. Offer does not expire. Natalie nodded, moved toward living room, paused in doorway. Thank you for seeing me, for standing up for me at that party, for offering something that treats me like human being, even if I say, no, thank you. You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Alexander said, but you are welcome. Following weeks brought changes. Natalie met with startup CTO, but was leaning toward Alexander's offer. Alexander established initiative as separate non-profit with $50 million initial endowment. Kyle ran background on tech core executives. Findings were damning. Alexander's lawyers leaked information to journalists. Within 2 weeks, TechCore's stock tanked. 3 executives under investigation. Publications ran apologetic retrospectives. Natalie read articles with relief mixed with bitterness. It is too late. 3 years too late. My father died thinking his daughter was failure. Vindication never comes soon enough to save people who needed to see it most. Alexander had no words, so he sat with her in silence. Brooks' initiative launched 3 months after dinner party. Natalie signed on as executive director at salary, reflecting her expertise. Within first month, they received over 200 applications. Natalie threw herself into work with fierce dedication, reviewing each application, designing processes, treating applicants with dignity. She hired staff, spoke at conferences, wrote articles. She became the professional she had been on track to become, but this time building something for others. Alexander watched her transformation with pride, because Natalie had become essential beyond professional collaboration. She made him laugh, challenged assumptions, played chess with Liam, filled his penthouse with warmth, and Alexander found himself falling in love with his former maid. It was inconvenient and complicated, but it was also undeniable. Answer came unexpectedly on rainy evening in late autumn. Natalie had stayed late to work on grant proposals. Liam was at sleepover. Alexander ordered Thai food. "I got offer today," Natalie said. "CTO position in San Francisco. 250,000 plus equity, everything." Alexander's stomach dropped. "That is amazing. You deserve it." Natalie set down chopsticks. "I am not taking it." "Why not?" Natalie leaned back. "Because I have realized I do not want to play that game anymore. I do not want to climb someone else's ladder, fight for respect in rooms that do not want me." She gestured at papers. "This is what I want. Brooks' initiative is purpose, justice, healing. That matters more than any CTO title." Alexander felt relief flood through him. "I am glad, selfishly glad." "Because of what?" Natalie asked, eyes sharp. "Because of you? Because there is something here I am not willing to name?" Air went still. Alexander met her gaze. "Is there? Something you are not willing to name?" Natalie stood and walked to window. "We said clear boundaries, no romantic complications." "You are not my maid anymore," Alexander pointed out. "You are executive director of independent non-profit. Power dynamic is not same." Natalie turned, conflict across her face. "It is still complicated. Your money funds initiative. There are still many ways this could go wrong." "There are also ways it could go right," Alexander said quietly. He crossed room. "I know it is complicated. But Natalie, I have spent 6 months falling in love with you, and I do not want to waste time pretending I have not." Natalie's breath caught. "Alexander, you cannot just say things like that." "Why not?" "It is true. You make me want to be better. You are brilliant and fierce, and you have turned my life upside down in best way. Liam adores you. I adore you. And I think, I hope, you might feel something similar." He paused. "But if I am wrong, tell me now, and I will never mention it again." Natalie stood very still, eyes shining. "You are not wrong," she whispered. "God help me, you are not wrong. I do feel something. I have been feeling it for months, trying to talk myself out of it." She laughed, broken. "But apparently I am exactly kind of fool who falls for her former employer whose money helped destroy her life. How messed up is that?" "Pretty messed up," Alexander agreed. "But also, maybe not, because that former employer is trying to be better, and that former maid is building something that actually matters. Maybe two messed up people can figure out how to be less messed up together." Natalie closed distance, moving into his space with decisiveness. "We do this carefully. Clear communication. Boundaries that protect both of us, and if it starts to feel wrong, we stop. No guilt, no drama. Agreed?" "Agreed," Alexander said. Natalie reached up and pulled him into a kiss that was soft and tentative and full of possibility. When they broke apart, Natalie said, "This is still a terrible idea." "Absolutely terrible," Alexander agreed. Then he kissed her again. 10 months later, Alexander stood in Brooks' Initiative headquarters. Natalie was at podium, presenting 1-year impact report. "In our first year, we have assisted 237 individuals across 15 industries, 17 successful wrongful termination suits, 68 people placed in new positions." She clicked to next slide. "This is Dr. Patricia Holmes. She was fired after reporting Medicare fraud, unemployed 2 years, almost lost her home, contemplated suicide." Natalie's voice remained steady, but Alexander heard emotion underneath. Brooks' Initiative provided legal representation, mental health support, financial assistance. She is now COO of hospital in Portland. More importantly, She is alive and thriving and mentoring other whistleblowers. That is what justice looks like. That is what second chances create. Room was silent. When she finished, applause was sustained. After presentation, they escaped into their car. Natalie kicked off heels, leaned back. That was exhausting. That was brilliant, Alexander corrected. You are brilliant. Natalie opened one eye. I do know that. It took me long time and therapy to know that again, but I do. Feels good. She took his hand. Thank you. For all of it. For standing up for me. For seeing me when I was invisible. Alexander squeezed her hand. You were never invisible. I was just blind. There is difference. They rode in comfortable silence. Then Alexander said, I have been thinking about Penthouse. I do not want to live there anymore. Natalie opened both eyes. Where do you want to live? Here, Brooklyn, or Queens, somewhere real, where Liam can play in actual neighborhoods. I want to sell Penthouse and donate most of money to Initiative's endowment. Natalie sat up, studying his face. You are serious. You want to walk away from that palace. It was never palace, Alexander said. It was showpiece. Monument to wealth I did not need. I want home, not museum. I want dinner conversations about Liam's projects instead of entertaining investors. I want life actually connected to world. Natalie was quiet, then smiled, that radiant smile. Okay, let us do it. Let us build something real together. Something real together, Alexander echoed. And as car carried them through Brooklyn streets, Alexander felt contentment. Not satisfaction of successful deal, but quiet, deep contentment of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing work that mattered, with woman who challenged and loved him. Story could have ended there. But life was messier than neat endings. There were still hard days when Natalie woke angry about 3 years lost, father who never saw vindication. There were moments when Alexander defaulted to old privilege patterns. There were arguments about money and power, about raising Liam. There were complications and setbacks. But there were also mornings when Alexander woke to find Natalie already working, muttering about grants. There were evenings when 3 of them cooked dinner together, dancing to music, Liam insisted on, laughing at burned vegetables. There were nights when Natalie told stories about her father, keeping his memory alive. There were moments of joy and connection and purpose that made all messiness worthwhile. And on Sunday morning in spring, almost 2 years after Alexander first saw Natalie at that $5 blind date, they stood together in small ceremony at Brooks Initiative headquarters. Not wedding, neither quite ready for that, but commitment ceremony witnessed by friends and staff and Liam, who served as best man and cried through entire event. They promised to keep seeing each other, keep growing together, keep challenging each other toward better versions of themselves. I love you, Alexander said, holding both of Natalie's hands, tears running down his face. You made me see world I was ignoring. You made me want to be better. You saved me from life that was comfortable but meaningless. Natalie smiled through her own tears. I love you too, and you saved me from believing I was only worth what worse people said about me. You gave me back my anger and my power and my belief that justice is possible. We saved each other. We saved each other, Alexander agreed. And as they kissed, surrounded by applause, Alexander thought about that afternoon when he had seen his maid at cheap café and made impulsive decision to intervene. He had thought he was rescuing her. He understood now that she had been one doing rescuing. She rescued him from his own blindness, from life where money was only measure of value, from comfortable cruelty of never having to see casualties of his success. Brooks' Initiative would help thousands rebuild lives. Natalie would speak at conferences, consult with companies, teach at universities. Alexander would step back from his firm to focus on philanthropy. But all of that was in future. In this moment, on this spring morning, Alexander and Natalie were simply two people who had found each other in café that smelled of burnt espresso and disappointment, who had survived betrayal and loss and casual cruelty of systems designed to crush them, and who had decided that love and justice and purpose were worth fighting for, even when fight was difficult. Especially when fight was difficult, because that is what truly valuable things always required. Not just money or power or privilege, but courage to see clearly, strength to stand up for what was right, and grace to keep trying, even when world insisted you were not worth effort. They had both learned that lesson hard way, and they would spend rest of their lives teaching it to anyone willing to listen.